Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. This is your host, idjester, and welcome back to the Advanced Squad Leader rule set in about 15 minutes. If you've been following along, you know that we are currently doing Part 16, Line of Sight. Last time we looked at obstacles and hindrances, and basically the difference between obstacles and hindrances. If you missed that episode, be sure to stop in and watch that, because some of the stuff we're going to learn in this episode we talked about during that episode. So we're still talking about line of sight and basically if units can see one another. And we're going to be talking about different things, different aspects that go along with line of sight. First thing we're going to talk about, I'm not sure if we covered this in last episode, is Section A of the rulebook, subsection 6.21, half-level obstacles. Any terrain feature defined as a half-level obstacle blocks all level line of sight through and through them into that blocks all same level line of sight through, not into or out of that hex. So half level obstacles never form blind hexes nor block line of sight to or from a higher level elevation. So in this case, if you look at our vessel module, you can see a normal typical ASL board. You're going to have hedges, you're going to have walls scattered throughout the map. You can see here between T2 and T3, this is wall hex side. Again, between T3 and U3, and between T3 and U4, this is all wall. You can see here we have the same thing between Q3 and Q4. We have a hedge between the hex side there, Q4, P3, hex side. So you can see what the terrain depiction is there. And basically, if units are not in that hex, you can't shoot through it. So for example, let's see if I can quickly find a good example of what we're talking about here. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. Okay, just as an example here, if this unit's in K1 and we have this unit in K4, they are both at level 0. And we have a wall hex side between them, so neither unit can see one another. Obviously now both units can see one another, although this unit can claim wall advantage, but that's not what we're going to be talking about in this episode whatsoever. So I just wanted to go over that. So one of the ways you can get around all these walls and hedges, and this is kind of what our focus is going to be on this episode, is to get up into higher level terrain. So in a normal ASL map board, the green terrain, the lightest greenish color, is considered level 0. And anything in that will be considered level 0. You can also see that there's other colors. We have a light brown here that is considered level 1 terrain, and we also have a dark brown which is considered level 2 terrain. So what I want you to think of is when we're talking about line of sight, and the best thing I can really kind of get across to you is think about these cubes, these building blocks. That's why I like using these building blocks. If I'm at a level 1 obstacle, or if I'm at a level 1 hill, you can see that I can just place myself here on a level 1 hill, and that basically represents one little cube, one height. If I'm on a level 2 hill, which is this darker reddish terrain here, obviously it's a little bit higher. It's the same thing as me being on 2 cubes. And basically for line of sight, when you start getting up off the ground and being able to shoot over obstacles, the basic rule is the height of the fire is got to be greater than the object's total height that's in between you and the firer. You and the target. So between the firer and the target, in this case here, we'll put my little figures back here. He is on a level 2 hill. We have another unit over here that is up on a level 2. We'll just assume a level 2 hill as well. You can see that these two have line of sight because 2 is greater than 1. It's greater than 1.5. It's still greater than 1.5. In fact, if I was to put another, let's copy this here. Let's just say that we have another level 2 hill here. these units can still see line of sight because the height of the fire is greater than or equal to all of the total object total heights. So when I mean total object heights is you have to take the object and also add in what kind of terrain it's on. So if we have a level 1 house and it's on a level 1 hill, it's going to have a total height of 2. Now that looks a little weird. Let me lower it down there and make it a little bit more reasonable there. So if we have a level 1 house, it's on a level 2 hill, it's still only 1 plus 1 is 2. I'm on a level 2 hill. I can see over that house onto past it and onto the next hex. If we look at some examples here in our vessel module, you can see that the unit here in X6 and V5, they are in the white-brown terrain. So this is level 1. This unit is 1 cube up. This unit is 1 cube up. Unfortunately for them, they have 2 cubes between them. So 1 is less than 2. So we cannot see one another. In fact, if we go into our vessel module, you will see red blocked line of sight. Red blocked line of sight. So these units do not have line of sight. This unit here in W7 does have line of sight over to V5 because he's at a cube of 2. This is a cube of 1. Between them is just a cube of 1 because it's going along this hex side. We're going to look at the color. The color is the light brown, so that's a level 1. He is also on a level 1, so we're a cube 2. He is a cube 1. This unit here in view 6 has a total height of 2 cubes. 1 for the terrain and 1 for the woods. So it is 2 cubes. This unit here is also 2 cubes. So this unit can see past. In fact, if we look at our line of sight, you will see that we have a clear line of sight to this unit right here, because it actually doesn't, even though it looks like it doesn't touch the wood terrain. So it's basically going over a level 1 obstacle. The reason I wanted to show you that was because if I change and I move this to get down this hex side, this unit in W7 wouldn't be able to see a unit in over here in S7 because this is actually 2 cubes height. This is 2 cubes height. He can see over it, but he can't see underneath it. And I'll explain that here in a little bit later on in this episode, what exactly I'm talking about. One of the things I did want to bring to everyone's attention, you can see we've got pages and pages of stuff to talk about here. But one of the biggest things to understand when we're talking about height and line of sight and everything is most ASL boards are going to come with a variety of different kind of buildings that you're going to be fighting over. And to understand the different heights of those buildings so you understand whether or not you can see them. So I put together a little chart here to kind of talk about it. And one of the biggest complaints or just weird nuances of ASL is actually a 2-story house is basically a level 1.5 object. And you're thinking, what? A 2-story house is a level 1.5 blocking obstacle? I don't believe that. Well, if we look here, you can kind of see, remember, even though it's a 2-story house, we were representing everything basically at level 0. So the first level of that house is basically a 0. The second level of that house is going to be level 1, and then usually you have some kind of a peak or attic or whatever that kind of sticks up a little bit, and so they consider that a half-level obstacle. So a 2-story house is actually only a level 1.5 obstacle. And over here on the right-hand side, you can see I have a representation on the ASL board of what a level 1.5 house looks like. We also have lots of different maps in ASL that have multi-story buildings. A multi-story building is a level 2.5. And so the same thing applies here when it's when we're talking about multi-story building. I kind of got these images off. The best one I could kind of get defined to represent is kind of this image here. Remember, even though it's It's a multi-story building. Our first level of our multi-story building is going to be level 0. And then, of course, our first level on the building, or our second level of the building, is actually considered still level 1. And our third level of the building is still considered only level 2. And then, of course, we have some kind of a peak or some kind of a roof that slants up, or attic or whatever, that kind of gives it extra half a level. So a multi-story building is actually a level 2.5 blocking obstacle. So again, here's a representation of what that would be. It's going to be a multi-hex building with stairwells, and we'll get more into that when we talk about the different terrain kinds and the depictions in what the different rules in section B. We're talking about that, but I kind of wanted to go over that so we all understood when I'm talking about, can you see over this height? The 2-story house is actually a 1.5 story blocking obstacle. Multi-story building is level 2.5. Of course, there are other kinds of buildings. I have some representation over here on the right-hand side. Sometimes you have a multi-story building that has a flat roof, so it's just going to be a level 2. You have factories, you have lumber yards, all kinds of different ones. But we're just talking about the main different kinds of buildings here, so when I start using some examples, you can understand what we're talking about. A single-story house is just a level 1. It might have a slight peak or anything on it, but it's still low enough that it's just considered level 1. We're talking about our woods. That is a level 1 blocking obstacle as well. So you can see again our little representation of our units here over on the left hand side. As long as they're up 2 cubes or a height of 2, that could be on a level 2 hill. That could also be in a level 2 building. If we look, this unit here could be in a level 2 of this building. I believe it's got a stairwell. So it does have a stairwell, yes. So this would be a level 2 multi-story building. This unit could actually be up at level 2, and I think there's little markers for that. Where would that be located? Where is it going to be? Info, building. Here we go. So level 1, we could probably flip this higher. There we go, level 2. So this unit could be possibly in a level 2 building, and it'd be up at level 2. And of course, then this unit here over in J6 is also in the dark brown. We can see that because of the dot, and it is up at 2 cubes. This unit is up at 2 cubes. So 2, nothing is higher in between these, so these two have line of sight here. This unit here is only at 1 cube. This is at 2 cubes. So to determine whether or not these units have line of sight, we're actually going to have to determine some blind hexes, but we're not going to cover that this episode. We're actually going to cover that in next episode. One of the things when you get up high, and I can't stress this enough, one of the most important rules that people forget and gloss over about is basically what I call the Grand Canyon effect. And I'm going to give you a quick little story about this to kind of just to give you something to think about. So a few years ago, me and the wife decided we're going to go to the Grand Canyon. We're driving, and of course, you know, the Grand Canyon's out in the middle of nowhere. So you're driving and you're driving and you're driving, and you're like, you know, this huge, humongous, gargantuan thing, right? And literally, you like pull up to the parking lot, and you go in the building, and they're like, "Oh, here's your map," and blah blah blah, and you see, you know, everything, and they're like, "Oh," and you're like, "Where's the Grand Canyon?" You're like, "Well, it's right outside," and you walk out like, you know, 100 feet from the house, and there's the Grand Canyon. You literally can't see the Grand Canyon until you get right up on the edge. Because, of course, you know, it's a big flat area. You can't see down into the hole. So basically the Grand Canyon is just a big hole. You can't see down into the hole until you get right up on the edge. And this is very, very important when we're talking about being able to fire and line of sight. These units here, this unit and this unit, can obviously see this unit over here. But unless you are on the edge of your height, you can't see down into anything whatsoever. So these units here, when it's trying to look, in fact, if we get some little thing here, you can see that these units here have line of sight, no problem, back and forth. When this unit tries to look down into this building, or into this unit over here, you can see it clips the edge of this hex in front of him. He can't literally see down into the hole that's right there in front of him because he's not on the edge. Think of this as the huge Grand Canyon again. So one of the most important things I want you to remember when you get up higher is that you can't see a lower level hex until you're on the edge. So for example, this unit here in X6 is up at 1 cube. This is 1 cube. This is 1 cube. This guy is at level 0. So he cannot see one another. In fact, if we show you this in line of sight with Vessel, you will notice that it is red, meaning he cannot see one another. And again, it's because he can't see the hole that's there. All he can see is the flat surface in front of him. He can see down this way because he's on the edge over here. He can see this way because he's on the edge over here. But he can't see this way, or even in fact he can't see this way. So these units here in X6 cannot see this unit in X8 because of the Grand Canyon effect. There's a big hole here. He can't see down into the hole because his line of sight is going across the same level that he is. These units here obviously is at the edge of the Grand Canyon. He can see the big hole all the way around him. In fact, unless he sees down this way. So again, if this unit was here in W4, we have the same effect. We're looking down here, we see fine. We look down here, we see fine. But once we're trying to see in the hole, we can't see the hole because we're not on the edge. Again, the Grand Canyon effect. So a couple things for this episode is just think about getting up higher so that you can get rid of all of these different half-level obstacles that could be causing major problems in line of sight. Once you get up higher, half-level obstacles never form blind hexes nor block line of sight to or from a higher level elevation. Let's put that in green because that is very, very important. Next episode, we're actually going to be talking about blind hexes, and to give you a little representation of what we're looking for, here's a little formula I threw together for the blind hex formula. Is H minus O plus R divided by 5 minus T is your blind hex formula. Think about that, and next time we're going to talk about that. Speaking of next episode, it's actually going to be a while before I get the next episode. I'm going to be out of town for a couple weeks, and I won't be able to have access to the internet, and I won't have access to obviously all my wonderful little files here. So it's going to be a couple weeks, probably towards the end of July, before I'm able to get out another episode. And when that episode comes, we're going to be talking about the blind hex formula. Last episode, I was actually asked you guys to give me some information about what you might want to talk about, what you might want to see, some representations, to cover some of the rules. And you guys have come up with some really good suggestions so far, so keep them coming. You can either post them on this last episode, or of course you can post them in this episode. I'm going to kind of peruse through them and find a couple of the very interesting ones. Of course, if you're going to leave some information for me, try to be as specific as you can about exactly what you're looking for, so that way I'm not kind of guessing. When we're talking about line of sight, I'm not sure exactly what they were talking about, but if you guys can leave more specific information, that would be good. So yeah, I want you guys to keep those. Keep these suggestions coming. Like I said, I've been quite a few really good ideas so far, things to cover. Well, as I mentioned, if you can kind of be a little more specific about what exactly you're looking for, a rules section, or maybe specific examples of what you're talking about, that would be great. You don't have to. I'm just saying it might be easier for me to decide, because I hate to make a video to try and help you out and then have you say, oh yeah, I knew all that, I wanted something else. So if we can get that taken care of, that would be great. So line of sight, make sure all the intervening terrain between you, the target, and the fire are equal to or less than the total height of the target and the fire, and you definitely have line of sight to have them. And of course, remember the Grand Canyon effect. If you are not on the edge, you are not able to see down beyond your level. So make sure, if you got these units, put them at the edge, and then obviously we now have line of sight to down there, we have line of sight to here, we have line of sight to here. And do we have line of sight to here? Well, that is going to be next episode when we talk about blind hexes. A very big thing, very important thing to talk about. And like I mentioned, the blind hex formula is h minus o plus r divided by 5 minus t. Think about that for a little while, and we'll see you guys towards the end of July with our blind hex video. Two-story houses, remember, crazy as it is, another little nuance in ASL, it's a level 1.5 obstacle. Multi-story buildings are going to be 2.5, and remember, we're talking about level 0, level 1, level 2, and of course that little peak or attic area, which is considered a half a level. And your single-story houses are all just level 1 obstacles. You don't have to worry about little halves or anything. And of course, as I mentioned, these are just general rules about the buildings. There's going to be factories, there's going to be other kinds of buildings. I'm not really talking about these. As you can see with our little examples here, lots of line of sight issues. The busier the map gets. But the easiest way for you to think about it is to think about cubes. I'm at cube 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. There's nothing in between except for maybe this half-level obstacles. Yep, looks like a half-level obstacle. So I'm going to, a hindrance, not an obstacle, half-level hindrance. So I'm going to take a penalty, but we definitely do have line of sight between these two units, as opposed to these two units, because, as we mentioned last time, the difference between hindrances and obstacles. We're talking about getting up into a different height level. We are here at ground level. We are at 2 blocks here. This is a total of 2 blocks. If I can see this block here, which is level 2, this is up 2. Anything beyond that has to be at level 2 or higher for me to be able to see it, because of the Grand Canyon effect. Again, even though I can see down into these 2 hexes, I can't see past this hex into any hex past it because of the Grand Canyon effect. When my line of sight changes, you can see obviously we've got a clear line of sight into other areas here. So just think of it as cubes. It's the easiest way that I can represent to show you guys line of sight issues. Make sure, again, your line of sight for your that the guy that shoots, the firer, that guy, and the guy that takes the bullets, the target, yes. Height of the firer is greater than all the object total heights. And remember, total heights, we're talking about adding whatever level you're on plus the height of your building. So obviously, if a building's on a level 2, I'm at level 2, there is going to be no line of sight between these units, because this is a 3 cubes, this is only 2 cubes, 3 is bigger than 2, so yep, nothing. And also remember, we're talking about a multi-level building. So if I take this representation, grab it, I bring this up here. Let's say there's this multi-level building between the target and the firer here. Remember, this is level 2.5. I'm at 2. 2.5 is bigger than 2. So you don't round down in this case. You keep the numbers. 2.5 is greater than 2. So no line of sight between these 2 units because of the multi-level building that's between them. So keep that in mind. Of course, if we had the other building, this guy here, copy that, and we'll paste that up here. If I had not this building, but we had this building, remember this is total height 1.5. 1.5 is less than 2, and it's less than 2, so these two again would have line of sight. So just think of these numbers, and hopefully this will help you along in your line of sight examples. Hopefully this is what you guys are looking for when we're talking about line of sight. Next time is going to be kind of the biggie, because this is usually the issue that most people run into when we're talking about line of sight, and that of course is going to be blind hexes. I created this little formula. I'm going to explain it next time, but basically for all of you out there, it's going to be the height. We're going to subtract the height of the object. We're going to add in the range divided by 5, and we're going to subtract any target height plus or minus to that number, and that's going to give us the number of blind hexes. So if you understood that, great. If you didn't understand it, the end of July, I will try to explain it for you. And we'll see you then, guys. Until then, have fun playing some ASL, and we'll see you then.